Meet Kaka, bro, as he takes us on a hilarious wild speed, love and marriages. In this episode, Mash, Kaka's popular international musician, dies.
However, following his tragic death at the peak of his career, it was not his music that hit the ceiling of controversy, but the way his burial went haywire.
Watch until the end. Next episode, find out how a sophisticated CEO, Chief Executive Officer of a South African company, woke up to find himself naked and locked up alone with a dead widow in a shocking, dangerous marriage tradition of widow inheritance ritual of the lakes. And the CEO dashed for his life into madness in the lake moonlight. And now to the tale, the 21 Knicker Salute.
There is an winding all-weather highway that graces the Masai Plains and runs parallel to the Mara National Park in Kenya, with branches to Serengeti and Ngorongoro Crater National Park in Tanzania. This road connects two countries, Kenya and Tanzania. Most of the time, this road has scanty traffic, except before and after the weekend when it experiences heavy traffic jams. I have never traveled on this road, but now I know about it after my brother Mash, the international music star, died in a road accident on this road. News of Mash's death in a car accident hit the country like a tsunami. Mash was a popular music icon in Africa, so his death sent shockwaves in the continent. Suddenly, this road became the most important road in Africa. From the day after the accident, there was a massive traffic jam on the highway as his music fans and the curious citizens traveled in droves from Tanzania to Kenya in an attempt to reach the site of the accident. I also attempted to drive to where I was told the accident had occurred, but gave up after my vehicle was held in traffic jam for half a day. The shocking news spread like wildfire, leaving fans heartbroken. This is what appeared in the media countrywide. A newspaper announcing Mash's tragic death in a car accident read, "Tragic strikes, the continent mourns star." The other newspaper headline cried, "The rising star has fallen. Hakina huruma." That's a Swahili proverb meaning death has no compassion. As long as my brother Mash was alive, he lived his life out there. Much to the chagrin of the rest of the family, his life was reported raunchy and fast-paced. The rest of the family members were stout religious people. Luckily, family and the local community members were shielded from Mash's speedy lifestyle. But news of his death thrust him abruptly back into our family hands, our homes and the village. It was a shock. The family came to seek refuge in the church. I, Kaka, just a young priest in the tranquil highlands, suddenly found myself on the front line of preparing the funeral of immense proportions for my brother Mash. I reflected upon Mash's turbulent life filled with fame and controversy as a popular musician. It was the publication of the news of Mash's death and his full-page profile that raised temperatures. On the day the newspaper ran Mash's full-page profile, I was scheduled to meet the family. Initially, our family was set to give Mash a solemn Christian burial. However, Mash was the wild card in the family. Nobody remembers when he was last seen at the church service or function since he dropped out of school in his teens. Did not help that some of his songs were highly controversial, both in political tone and spiritual connotation. So there was much murmuring among the church leaders. The day after the full-page newspaper exposition, a new element popped up. Suddenly, posters began appearing on the streets and in the newspapers. Posts of young, beautiful girls posted almost everywhere, proclaiming to be the wife of Mash. Only it was not one post or one lady. Tearful interviews were being aired on radio and TV stations across the continent. As one social journalist termed it, the Mash Wives Declaration Saga. The proliferation of various newspaper stories and pictures of girls claiming to be wives of or engaged to Mash was worrying the family. Mash had never introduced any woman to the family as a wife. As it turned out, this was just the beginning of the saga. It was to get worse. I had another meeting with the family to discuss Mash's funeral. I reported to them the church fraternity was hesitating whether Mash truly lived a life deserving Christian burial. Tensions rose as members of the family expressed their strong desire for a Christian burial. Curiously, the next day's newspaper ran a headline: "Family tensions rise over funeral plans. The family debates honoring Mash's complex life." I really don't know who went to the newspaper. I just knew then there was a mole in the family. The newspaper story about Mash read as follows: "In the serene highlands of East Africa, from the panoramic view of the lush highlands of East Africa, a land rich with history and culture, a storm is brewing beneath the surface. There is a silent tug of war going on between the family on one hand, the church on the other hand, and the musicians' die-hard fans from across the continent." That newspaper report seemed to raise Jezebel from the ground. Fans of the musician Mash streamed in and presented their ideas to the family. They wanted to be given the body of the musician so that they can bury him the way he lived. Wild. The first to come to the family was a lady introducing herself as the composer and songwriter of Mash's music. She came to tell the family to be aware that she owned half of the copyright of all Mash's recorded music. This is something the rural folks did not understand, as they did not care a hoot about Mash's music. They told her off and called her names. Some of them called her gold digger in her face, just as they had been labeling the ladies under the Mash Wives Declaration Saga. I did not agree with the family and pleaded with them to tread slowly and listen to everybody, but they just ignored my pleadings. By now, the family was so hostile to Mash's mourners. When the next two groups came to pay their respect to the family, they were barely tolerated. The next group were the producers of Mash's music. They came loaded with food for the mourners and the family. Their good gesture was appreciated, as it is the African way of showing compassion to the grieving family. However, their request to organize Mash's burial was rejected in totality. At that moment, I spied through the window a group of young people who had parked their sporty motorbikes near the family gate and had congregated under a tree in a plotter's conspiratory stance. One of them, who seemed to be the chief plotter, was doing most of the talking. I also saw when the Mash's producers departed, their leader stopped to chat with the chief plotter. My sixth sense told me this was something I should warn the family about, but I thought better of it and didn't. That was my first great mistake. I think, having encountered only hostility, the next of Mash's mourners group to visit the family decided to do so at our village level. I only learned about this visit the following day, courtesy of the newspaper report, complete with photos. The newspaper reported a group of musicians that performed with Mash paid a courtesy call to our family in the rural area to console the family. They had been hosted by the village paramount chief. I scratched my head but got no answer. Sure enough, the village paramount chief showed up at the family home. He said his mission was to arrange for a tribal burial for Mash, whom he called the son of the soil. He quoted a Kiswahili proverb, asiye na mila ni mtumwa, meaning culture frees one from chains of slavery. However, he was shocked when not only was his mission brushed aside, his upcountry folks were warned to avoid any contact with those people, meaning fans, because they were only interested in Mash's wealth. I don't know how the issue of Mash's wealth came in. Personally, I didn't think so, but kept my own counsel. Before departing, the village paramount chief added a Kiswahili proverb rider, asiyekubali ya wengi ni mchawi, which translates, one who ignores majority opinion is a witch or is doomed. The family tried to chew that one. They said one side of the scale balanced politicians, church leaders, and the family. The other side had only Mash's fans. They selfishly concluded that the family side outweighed the fans. I thought otherwise, but reserved my opinion to myself. Mash's comrades did not falter in their effort to reach the family. There are moments when I felt frustrated by them, I must admit, but also times when I admired that my brother Mash had such die-hard followers. There is a Kiswahili proverb, mbio za sakafuni huishia ukutani. Floor races terminate on the wall. Just as every road has an end or terminus, the Mash burial saga between family and my church ended up at the big church, our country church headquarters. They convened a meeting between church elders and family members to find a solution. An intense debate ensued about honoring Mash's life versus adhering to church traditions. It was also a wake-up call for the church elders to discuss tradition versus modernity. Tradition clashed with the vibrant spirit of the youth. The family met with church elders in a dimly lit meeting room. I was there, listening intently. I should have participated more in the discussion, but as no one sought my opinion, I kept my counsel to myself. That was my second big mistake. At that meeting, the family's wishes won the day. Along the way, my star was rising. I was invited into the deep sanctuary of the church. I sat with the big church seniors and bishops. At one stage, I participated in a Zoom meeting between our big church and our mother church headquarters abroad to give them an outlay of challenges faced by African church. While the family and the church were planning a somber burial, the fans of my brother, musician Mash, whom I noticed were mostly young ladies, had other ideas. They wanted to be given the body of the musician so that they can bury him the way he lived, wild. They carried to the church a concoction of bottles and vials of chemicals and perfumes. They demanded for the body of Mash to be brought for embalming like the pharaohs of Egypt. Mash forever, they cried. They sang. Others suggested after embalming, the body be taken for cremation. It was just mind-blowing. Meanwhile, the pressure from the high echelons of the government was bearing heavily on the family and the church. There was a whisper some government officers and the politicians at the highest level also wanted to turn the burial into a state funeral. This idea incensed the fans, who quoted several instances when the musicians' open concerts had been disrupted, cancelled, or tear-gassed by government agents. The day after they were then denied Mash's body to embalm, there were noisy protests held outside the church on a daily basis thereafter. As the countdown to the burial date approached, I was facing mounting pressure from both his family and Marsh's fans who still wanted to take over the burial arrangements. The divisions among Marsh's people on both sides was growing wider, and I was caught in the middle of it. My third big mistake is my omission to invite Marsh's fans to these meetings, as they refused to back down. One of their leaders, the chief plotter, later made a solo meeting with the traditional elders in an effort to change their stand. As the day for the burial grew closer, another group of fans calling themselves makeup artists popped at the scene. They said they wanted to make up Marsh's body so that he could look good during the burial. They insisted that every time Marsh went on stage, he had the group work on him, his face and his body and his clothes so that he looked presentable. Well, it was like the family just laughed it out. When the meeting with traditional elders failed to bear fruit, a group of Marsh's most devoted fans held a conspiratory meeting behind the church. When I look back, I believe this is when they hatched a secret plan to disrupt the burial if they did not get their way. The following day, groups of young men and women congregated at the Independence Square Gardens in the Central Business District, holding photos of Marsh. They were grieving and vowing to give him a proper send-off that reflects his lifestyle. It was not good news for the family, church, and the government, who were now working in cohorts over the burial plans. They condemned it as interference. By this time, top church leadership had committed a decision to cooperate with the political elite to bury Marsh. The government was preparing to bring in anti-riot police if necessary to handle any attempted disruption of the burial. But this strong arm alarmed the bishops. My opinion was sought by the big church leaders, who then sent me to investigate demonstrators and find a way to defuse the situation. My church is based in the highlands west of the city. The weather is usually very cool and misty in the morning and in the late afternoons. Now I was being sent into the smoke atmosphere of the city center to deal with Marsh's fans. This is not my familiar ground, but our priesthood calling is for anywhere. When I returned to them with a report of my trip, they were not happy at all. They sent me back to negotiate a burial participation formula with the gathering of demonstrators in Central Business District, or CBD. I found them grieving and vowing to give him a proper send-off no matter what. A group of passionate fans had formed a committee to plan a memorial they thought would honor Marsh's legacy. I was in a dilemma as emotions ran high. The environment was charged and very, very dangerous. I realized I may have to compromise more and concede more ground to cater for the fans' desires in order to express their grief within the bounds of dignity, planning an alternative tribute after the official burial. I appealed to the fans, tried to reason with them about respecting Marsh's memory in a way that honors their love without scandalizing the funeral. The fans listened to my reason. Only a few remained resolute. Actually, I was very surprised and intrigued by the way they sort of fell for my proposition without a protest. We tentatively made an unwritten MBA, Mash Bash agreement. I left the demo area scratching my head on whether I should have stayed longer. Later, I bitterly rued that last and fatal mistake I made. It was after I left that the final conspiracy was conceived on a big scale. The day of the funeral reached. They hit us below the belt at the last moment. As soon as the hearse carrying Marsh's remains arrived at the church, a group that came earlier as music producers appeared with a lawyer. They wanted to stop the burial process unless they were allowed to participate in the burial. We told them that we had no problem, everyone was welcome to participate. However, they stated that they only wanted a space to escort the hearse containing the casket in a convoy procession from the church to the cemetery. Also, that the procession to lead the hearse should travel on foot, not by motorcade. Only that? They said yes. Considering the distance from the church to the cemetery is a mere less 2 kilometers, the request was doable. Finally, the time for the funeral arrived. Kaka stood by the church watching as people streamed in for the funeral. What I had no idea was that a bittersweet day awaited everyone present and across the continent. The funeral program had been set according to government protocol. First, the prayer at the church, followed by a sermon in the church, then procession to the cemetery, where politicians would be given their space to give their speeches, and a joint photo shoot before burial. After what we had been through, the ultimatum by the music producer's lawyer seemed like a minor issue. We agreed and shook hands. Had we known how innocent seeds they were planting in our mind was the most dangerous one, we would have thrown them out with their lawyer. I stood in the church compound and watched as the church filled with mourners from all walks of life. There were politicians, business people, academicians, and family members who filled the church. There was no space left for Marsh's fans. But then they didn't show up at all, and I assumed it was because of my Bash agreement (MBA) with them at the Independence Square Gardens. When the program began, I delivered a heartfelt sermon balancing reverence of Marsh's life and church. The music producers had asked Marsh's singers to act as flower girls and lead the hearse from the church to the cemetery. True to their request, a group of ladies, impeccably dressed, carrying bouquets of flowers, were at the church entrance ready to lead the hearse procession. They looked great, therefore we let them march in front of the hearse. Outside the church gate, there was a choir belting out gospel melody. That is what it sounded like until I got closer. Then I realized they were belting out Marsh's songs with the gospel rendition. Before I could absorb the shock, I saw him. Behind the choir, I spotted the chief plotter. I cannot forget that voice. For a moment, I was not sure it was him. But my heart started beating fast. Something was not quite right. Only I couldn't figure out what. Suddenly, seemingly out of nowhere, we were swamped by something like an ocean wave. Then, the hearse carrying the casket vanished in a wave of excited crowd. For a moment, there was panic. Then I noticed the flower girl who were marching forward in the direction of the cemetery were still on the road. The one behind turned and motioned to us to keep following them. We had no alternative. We followed. I was struggling to regain control of the situation. I felt a mixture of outrage and compassion for the fans who loved my brother. I reflected on my brother's complexity caught between his love for music and our family expectations. By the time we arrived at the cemetery, most of the politicians had fallen by the wayside, driven off fast by security teams, ever suspicious of their voters. I was met at the cemetery gate by the now familiar figure of the music composer. She introduced herself as the MC or master of ceremony. Apparently, the crowd had taken over the sound system as she was holding the wireless mic in her hand. Guess who was escorting the MC? Our chief plotter. I remembered the time he had come with a motorbike gang at the family gate, and the Kiswahili proverb hit me. Akumulikaye mchana, usiku atakuchoma. Whoever spies openly on you will attack you at your weakest. I just looked at them and said nothing. I was still trying to figure out how we were going to get out of this mess. Without a pause, the MC began her program. She seemed to have her own burial program memorized in her heart. Then a bizarre event was taking place. Every time the MC announced a group to come forward, the fans would bring in a coffin. For a moment, I thought I was attending a different funeral. I was beginning to panic when the chief plotter came close and whispered to me, "Man of God, we may be ageless, tribeless, and religionless, but we are not careless. Marsh will be brought along and you will bury him. Just stay cool, man." I saw what he meant when a few minutes later, plainclothes state agents grabbed the first casket and dashed off with it, shooting in the air to scare away screaming fans. I learned later that when the government pathologist came at night and pried open the coffin to examine the body, he encountered a block of wood wrapped in mattress. But by then, it was too late. The MC introduced Marsh's backup singers, then followed by international collabo artists from Caribbean, West African popular artists who collaborated with Ash to produce numbers, and the people who were introduced as the pilgrims from Jaland, Ethiopia. Then the introduction of long-term music partners and those who had produced music with Marsh. For the first time, I realized the family was bonding for the very first time with our son, or their son Marsh, the real living Marsh, although he was now dead. Every time he went to stage a concert in a country, he would hire and train dancers and musicians. He would later hire them and collaborate with them on subsequent visits. This is what gained him popularity across the continent. Now we are witnessing their way of honoring him posthumously. Those who could not attend his funeral here in person had staged their own local funerals and sent a photo of the mock burial. These were now produced into large posters being paraded before us. They were paraded before us as follows. Large poster by Marsh's South African artist conducting his funeral in South Africa, complete with a priest leading them. Large poster by Marsh's Congo artist conducting his funeral in Congo. Large poster by Marsh's Madagascar artist conducting his funeral in Madagascar. Large poster by Marsh's Zimbabwe artist conducting his funeral in Zimbabwe. Large poster of Marsh's West African artists conducting his funeral in Nigeria. Large poster of Marsh's Bongo artists conducting his funeral in Tanzania. Finally, the genuine casket carrying the remains of Marsh arrived. I knew it was real because the fans were weeping openly and throwing tantrums. They were also throwing mementos, flowers, and amulets in the path of the pallbearers. At the graveside, the casket was received by stage artists wearing stage attire. Then it was my turn. I was told to say the prayers. I completed saying the last prayer for the departed musician and gestured for the lowering of the casket into the grave. The men present lowered the casket into the grave. Then a new confrontation suddenly began with the marching in of young women who had been declaring their love and commitment to
MASH in newspapers and television interviews. I was holding a spadeful of soil, ready to throw into the grave, when a high-pitched female voice rang out, interrupting the solemn atmosphere. A young woman stepped forward dramatically, and that is how the shocking tribute began. Then a series of female voices rang out, all claiming to be MASH's queens. As they cried out, 21 beautiful girls moved forward in unison, pushing other mourners aside until they surrounded the grave. Queen number 1 said, "Wait, you can't just bury my king MASH like this. He has a debt to pay. He was engaged to marry me." Queen number 2 said, "Me too. I was engaged to marry the king." She continued, "Dear friends and relatives, you may not understand how much we loved King MASH and how much he loved each one of us in a special way. Every one of us was waiting to be chosen as one of his queen. Very sad he has died before marrying any of us. But we will still consider him as our husband. So we will give him what he liked most and got from each one of us as his queen. Are we together, wives?" "Yes!" Queen number 1 said, "All right, queens. We were loved by King MASH. Let us give him a 21 salute for MASH. Lower King MASH's flag at half-mast." The beauty queens lifted their skirts up and lowered their undergarments, pausing their action at knee level. The mass of MASH's fans cheered widely. Queen number 2 added, "This is the half-mast salute. Now MASH's queens to be no more. We will show our King MASH what he truly deserves. A 21 salute at full mast." As the crowds cheered on, the beauty queens stripped off their undergarments, then in unison tossed the knickers in the grave on top of the casket. The action created a scandalous scene that left many speechless. The incident sent shockwaves into the crowd of religious people gathered at the funeral, thrusting me into a moral dilemma. I surveyed around for the mourners' reactions. Some mourners were appalled, others were amused, showcasing a divide between tradition and modernity. I will not get into the nitty-gritty what I witnessed as MASH's last dance, except that the whole burial sequence seems to have been carefully and meticulously arranged by a team of concert experts. This included a massive ready-made marble monument that was placed on top of the fresh grave. Then on top of that marble monument, they fixed a plastic real-size wax image of MASH. This was all done non-stop amid a fanfare of dance and celebration. I was mesmerized by the choreography of events unfolding before me. After the burial, the fans moved to an area called Monument of the Fallen Soldier at the east gate of the cemetery. There, a temporary platform was being hastily erected, even as burial drama was going on at the graveside. The fans then held a lively MASH farewell concert that went on and on infinitum. Thankfully, here is the image that appeared in the newspapers the following day. The reporter who wrote the story quoted one African proverb, "When death finds you, may it find you alive." He was emphasizing the importance of actively engaging oneself in life, not just existing passively until death arrives. What happened that day will be etched in memories for generations to come. But for my brother MASH, that is the way it was. If you enjoyed this video of Kaka's Love Inferno, remember to like, subscribe and comment, and share it out. A new video will be coming out every Saturday. Did you watch the last Saturday's special video entitled Sour Milk Love? Check it out.